Hello everyone, it's David from Automotive Press. You may not know, but I have been evaluating and testing cars for over 35 years, and one of my number one pet peeves is the fact that most cars have no feeling when it comes to the actual steering feel and also driving character. Why is that? Well, one of the reasons is the fact that car companies moved from hydraulic power steering to electric power steering, or which is EPS, and in that process, a lot of the feel from the road has just disappeared. And so very few companies are able to do that correctly and still give you a steering feedback and a steering feel that is a little bit like an old hydraulic system. One of them is Mazda. In fact, Mazda is the only consumer brand I think that kind of gets it and is able to give us a proper steering feel. Now obviously if you pay a lot more and go to a brand like a Porsche or maybe even Alfa Romeo, those guys get it too. They have just the right steering feel. But no other mainstream automakers have been able to do this right, except for Mazda. And I know here in Canada we say Mazda, in the US you guys say Mazda, and in Japan we say Mazda. So, well, I'll just say whatever it makes sense to me right now, which is Mazda. But anyhow, coming back to this brand, I think if you drive something like a CX-30, which I have behind me, you're going to be shocked if you compare this to all the competitors, because the steering feel and the handling and the fun to drive factor is out of this world. I dare you to go and test drive a CX-30, and then right after that, go and drive a Toyota Corolla Cross, a Honda HR-V, Nissan Kicks, and maybe even Subaru Crosstrek. Drive them back to back, maybe on the same day. Don't wait a couple of days in between, and you're going to come back and you will understand what I mean by Mazda's ability to produce car that provides maximum fun to drive factor and a great steering feel that gives you almost like Italian or German feel. Something, once again, no one else has been able to do in this price range. So in fact, let me give you 7 reasons why I believe this Mazda CX-30 is the most fun to drive small crossover in the market. Let's go. Welcome back. So before I talk about the 7 reasons why this is the most fun to drive small crossover, let me do my usual quality check. This is built in Mexico, but it's one of the best Mexican factories that I know, because the quality of the body fit and finish and the panel alignment is absolutely first class, especially considering that this is a very affordable small crossover. So if you look at the panel alignment here and the panel gap, it's only 3 millimeter here, 3.2 millimeter, 3 millimeter, and 3.1 millimeter. That is unheard of for a small $30,000 to $40,000 crossover vehicle to have a panel alignment and panel fit this good, because nothing is out of spec here and the gaps are so small. Also, the paint job looks fantastic. I love this kind of light gray color, really good metal flakes, very evenly spaced, and the general panel alignment and the quality of the metal are really well done. Everything looks good. Even the gas cap, which is often difficult to get aligned, looks perfect. Nothing seems to be sticking out. Or the plastic part looks good. You know what? If you don't know any better, you might think that this was built in Japan, because the overall alignment and panel fit and quality is that good. So now that the car has passed my manufacturing quality audit with flying colors, let's move on to talk about those 7 things, because honestly, you've got to drive this and you've got to drive a whole bunch of other competitors and just compare side by side, especially if you can take them through some twisty road. And if you love driving, if you really enjoy having a fun to drive car, you're going to appreciate this more than any other car in this price range. So let's go for a quick drive and I'll explain to you why this thing is outstanding. So I'm on the road now with the CX-30, and the first point is the most important one, which is the steering feel. Like I said before, most manufacturers have moved from the old hydraulic power steering system to electric power steering, and they really struggle to keep that feel on the steering wheel, because without hydraulic pressure building up on the steering, it was almost impossible to create that sensation. Over the years, though, manufacturers got better and better in replicating that feel, but honestly, only a few brands have managed to perfect it. One of them is Porsche, They have electric power steering, but the steering effect and the steering feel is fantastic. And maybe a few other notable European brands include Alfa Romeo, which also has a fantastic feel in terms of steering. But aside from those, not too many automakers have been able to do a good steering feel. Not even Audi or Volkswagen, which used to be pretty good at this, but over the years, they have really lightened their steering. Same thing for BMW as well. But Mazda have really been focusing on creating this sporty feel with the steering, with the right amount of heft. It's not too light, lots of feedback from the road, and if you actually don't know any better, you'd believe or you'd think that this is still a hydraulic power steering. So the steering mechanism itself, and then the feedback I get, second to none. No other cars in this price range comes even close. If you go and drive the Toyota Corolla Cross, it's very light steering, comfortable and refined, but not much feel in terms of steering. If you go to Honda HR-V, a little bit better, still very light, and still a little bit loose feeling and numb feeling, although better than the Corolla Cross. If you go to Nissan Kicks, maybe even worse. It's very light steering, and it's very light, but once again, maybe comfortable for some people who like lighter steering. And then finally, Subaru Crosstrek, which actually has a pretty good feedback, better than the Corolla Cross or the Honda HR-V, but not anything like this one here, which has a direct feedback and a direct response. So steering feel, top of the class. Second reason is related to the first one, which is to do with actual handling. So by definition, the handling means how the car feels around corners, whether it stays flat, whether the cornering is good, and whether it stays agile and controlled despite the road conditions. And again, from that perspective, no other car company can produce a small crossover with this feel. Not only do you get a really good feedback from the steering mechanism when I make turns or even quick turns like this, CX-30 communicates with you, let you know where you're going. You know exactly which way the tires are pointed, and the car stays very flat and also stays very agile. The third reason why the CX-30 is the most fun to drive small car is its firm ride. As you can tell, I just went over some bumpy road conditions, and you get a lot of transmission of the road feel. So I love it because I want to feel the road. I want to know what's going on underneath the car. And so for me, this one feels more like a sports coupe than a crossover, and so I absolutely love it. But I admit that the sporty ride may not be for everyone, especially if you're looking for a comfortable, refined feel for a small crossover. Then CX-30 would not be the right car for you. You'll be better off buying a Corolla Cross or any of the other cars I mentioned, because they have a very smooth, very comfortable ride. The CX-30 transmits everything underneath the road to your hands and to your body actually. So I love it because I want a sporty vehicle. I don't want cushy, mushy ride, but only you can decide what's right for you. If you always wanted to buy a kind of sports coupe, but you actually need a crossover, this is the right one for you. But if you just wanted the most comfortable SUV in this price range, don't buy CX-30 because it is very firm and it might not be for everyone. Okay, what about the next point, which is the fourth point? Well, let me just step on the brake right now, a little bit firm like this. Amazing feel. The brake has just the right amount of modulation. It has, again, a little bit of pushback when you step on the brakes, as opposed to many other small crossover or small cars in general, which has a bit of a mushy feel. That's a pretty common thing in this small market. But with Mazda CX-30, you get an immediate response when you step on the brake. It pushes back a little bit and give you a direct feel. Honestly, unless you move up to some expensive German manufacturer like a Porsche or Italian manufacturers like Alfa Romeo, you don't get brake feel like this one. This one really communicates with you, and it's a little hard to explain. But if you drive the CX-30 against the competitors, then step on the brake as well, you will know what I mean by a fantastic brake feel. And that is, again, one of the reasons why it contributes to making CX-30 the most fun to drive small crossover. The fifth thing I want to talk about is engine, which is one of the most important points for any car that is supposed to be fun to drive. So in the case of a CX-30, you have a bit of a dilemma. because the engine that's on this CX-30 GT model is a standard 2.5 liter four-cylinder engine that is not turbocharged, and therefore it has a modest 191 horsepower. Now if I step on the accelerator, it's still pretty decent and more than enough acceleration for most of you. But if you really want to maximize your fun to drive experience with this vehicle, go for the optional turbocharged 2.5 liter four-cylinder engine, which has 250 horsepower, so way more power and also way more torque. And most of all, it has such an amazing sports car feel. I mean, it's almost an overkill for a vehicle of this size. So if you don't mind paying a couple $1,000 more, I believe it's $2,000 more for the turbocharged engine, definitely get that one. Because if you're going to spend $35,000 Canadian on a CX-30 top model like a GT, you might as well spend $2,000 more and get the turbocharged engine. Having said that, no complaints about this standard engine. It has more than enough power and torque to give you reasonable acceleration. But I would say it is not the strength of the CX-30 if you stay with a standard 2.5. But if you buy the turbo, once again, it skyrockets this vehicle right to the top in terms of it being the most fun to drive. The sixth point is the transmission, which is always very controversial because most small cars use CVT transmission, which isn't fun and also just doesn't feel right in any vehicle that is supposed to be sporty in character. But in the case of CX-30, we have a real transmission, not a CVT, and it is 6-speed, and it is quick shifting, crisp in terms of feel. And if I step on it like this, it just takes off and the transmission will shift accordingly. So I think the actual synchronization of the transmission character to the engine, extremely well done. I'm just so happy that it is not a CVT transmission, which you will find in many of its competitors in this price range, and instead we get a real shifting transmission. In fact, Mazda is really very adamant about using a normal type transmission versus CVT. I'm thankful for that because there's no way you can produce kind of fun to drive sporty character with a CVT transmission. By the way, don't forget that because it is a small crossover, you get all-wheel drive, which means that no other small sports coupe can match this in terms of a winter performance. So you can have a fun to drive character even if it's a little bit slippery or even if there's a bit of a snow, just because it has a fantastic all-wheel drive. Try doing that in a standard or normal sports cars or sports coupe. Not possible because most of them will be rear-wheel drive, and you know what, they're kind of hopeless in winter time, even with winter tires. Anyway, getting back to the seventh point of why this is the most fun to drive is the fact that everything else in the car also give you a feel that this is more like a sports car than a crossover. So for example, the seats are quite sculptured. I get really good side support, in fact firm side support. Even here, as well, you can see it's pretty deep right here, and the bolsters comes right out and holds you in place when you're cornering. And even the actual dash panel and the basic design looks simple, straightforward, and something that is more like a sports car feel here with a big round gauges than a family type crossover. This one doesn't feel like a crossover at all in terms of interior. I love the interior design. It's simple, straightforward, but also sporty looking. And like I said, the seat comfort and the seat support is excellent, so you can drive pretty aggressively and be rewarded because the seats will hold you and the dash and everything else make you feel like driving a sports car, even though this is a crossover. So as a conclusion, is this the best small crossover? No, far from it, because if you want the most amount of comfort or the roomiest crossover, then this is not the right car for you because it's actually a little bit tight in terms of space. It doesn't offer hybrid, for example, as well. So there are a lot of compromises. And so for some of you guys, something like a Corolla Cross or Honda HR-V or even Nissan Kicks might be a better choice. But for those of us who really enjoy driving, who want a sports car but need a small crossover to kind of carry people around and carry goods, then this is the best compromise. And in fact, it is the best handling, most fun to drive small crossover for the money. Even if you were to pay twice as much, there's not too many vehicles that can compete with the CX-30 in terms of the great steering feel and the handling, fun to drive character, and the overall driving feel. Again, don't take my words for it. Drive the CX-30 and then on the same day, go and drive all of its competitors, Corolla Cross, Honda HR-V, Nissan Kicks, even maybe Volkswagen Taos, or even go up to a more expensive vehicle like a BMW X1 or Audi Q3, and you're going to be shocked how good the driving character and the driving feel of this vehicle is. Anyhow, I hope this was helpful. If you enjoyed my video, please give me a thumbs up, make some comments. But until next video, I'm signing off for now. Now go and test drive the CX-30.